Revenge is a dish best served cold. This is one of those phrases that most people have heard, and many may well have said, but no one actually knows where it comes from. The first recorded use of the phrase comes from a fairly obscure novel from the mid-19th century. It's been used a lot since then, though, and has entered the popular lexicon. The quote has been found in The Godfather, and then again a few years later in the film Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which is the best Star Trek film, by the way. And in that movie, the quote is said to be an old Klingon proverb, and followed up with the line, "It's very cold in space." Revenge has been much in the news this week. On Wednesday, Dominic Cummings, the former chief advisor to Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, spoke for 7 hours to a parliamentary select committee. Now, some of you may know Mr. Cummings as the man who orchestrated the Vote Leave campaign that led to Brexit. Some of you may remember him as the chap who, at the height of the first lockdown, decided to drive for half an hour to the town of Barnard Castle to test his eyesight. He is certainly a controversial figure. Mr. Cummings was forced out of his high-powered job as the Prime Minister's right-hand man back at the end of 2020, and he's certainly not happy about it. On Wednesday, he let the world know that, and among the many claims that he made in his testimony were that having worked closely with Boris Johnson, Mr. Cummings thought that he was not fit for office. He claimed that the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, should have been fired. And he claimed that the Prime Minister's girlfriend was going crackers about newspaper stories regarding her dog. Most worryingly of all, though, Mr. Cummings claimed that tens of thousands of people died who didn't need to die because of mistakes made by the government. It seems to me that even if what he said there was true, Mr. Cummings' testimony was very much motivated by revenge. He was angry at losing his job, and so publicly, and boy did he want everyone to know it. Revenge is when you act harmfully towards someone because they have, or because you think they have, done you some wrong. The notion of revenge has been around for a long time, and has been a big part of art and literature. The Greek playwright Aeschylus wrote a trilogy of plays called the Oresteia, which have revenge right at their core. In the plays, the protagonist, Orestes, kills his own mother in revenge for her brutal murder of Orestes' father, Agamemnon, the hero of the Trojan War. Because he commits the dreadful crime of matricide, which is the murder of one's own mother, Orestes is pursued by the Furies. In the Greek world, the Furies were 3 sisters: Alecto, who punished mortal crimes, Megara, who punished infidelity, and Tisiphone, who punished murderers. Various accounts of these 3 demonic sisters describe them as having snakes for hair, or dogs' heads with large bat's wings and blood-red eyes. They are terrifying, and in Greek myth, if you do wrong, if you commit a terrible crime, then the Furies will destroy you. In Aeschylus' play, they hunt Orestes down, driving him mad. It is only due to the actions of the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom, that they eventually stop. What are the Furies, though? Aren't they simply a personification of the guilt that people felt? Orestes killed his mother, and he was driven to do so by a desire to avenge his father. It suited the drama of the play to have his guilt shown to be not inside his head, but instead for it to be diabolical creatures punishing him. Ultimately, though, we all feel guilt for everything that we do which we know to be wrong. Revenge leads Orestes into a cycle of self-loathing and self-destruction. He's fortunate to be rescued by a goddess. That's not an option for most of us. Instead, revenge is something that we have to forego. We have to not choose the path of vengeance. Instead, when faced with something which might appeal to a perhaps instinctive desire for revenge, we pursue something else. We look for for justice. The difference between justice and vengeance is an interesting one to explore. Revenge is essentially an emotional response to negative internal emotions. When someone is motivated by a desire for vengeance, they take pleasure in the pain of others, the people that wronged them. It is about getting even. It is about restoring a sense of balance in their own mind. They did something wrong to me, so I'll do something wrong to them. There are a lot of times in art where the avenger, the one committing an act of vengeance, the one taking revenge, is the hero. In the film Gladiator, the hero is Maximus Decimus Meridius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and he will have his vengeance in this life or the next. In the wonderful Roald Dahl book Matilda, the evil Mrs. Trunchbull is led to believe she's being haunted by the ghost of her murdered stepbrother-in-law. His death is avenged by Matilda's superpowers. Now, in both these examples, we are hugely on the side of the person taking vengeance. We see the vengeance as the same as justice, but it isn't. Vengeance has that selfish element to it. In the movie of Matilda, we see her laughing as her victim flees in utter terror. Justice isn't about being vindictive. You will have all heard the saying, 2 wrongs don't make a right, and in relation to revenge, that rings very true. One of the most famous avengers in all art is Hamlet from Shakespeare's play of the same name. He is urged by the ghost of his father to revenge his foul and most unnatural murder. The pursuit of this vengeance drives Hamlet to madness, or at least to pretend he's mad. Later in the play, Hamlet claims that Hamlet does it not. Hamlet denies it. Who does it then? His madness. A desire for vengeance, a desire to kill and revenge his father, drives the hero mad. There is no closure in Hamlet other than his and pretty much everybody else's death. Justice is fundamentally about restoring some balance to things. Justice is something that relies upon law. The laws exist to try and right the wrong that may drive an individual towards vengeance. However, justice tries to right those wrongs in a manner that isn't personal. Moral justice is essentially based upon attempting to bring out a shared belief in what is right. Vengeance is personal, whilst justice is about the whole of a society deciding what is needed to right a wrong. Perhaps one of the best examples of this comes from the Anglo-Saxon period and the concept of weregild. This was a fine that was levied on someone who killed someone else. The amount you were fined depended upon who was killed. We have some wonderful old documents, which probably date from the mid-10th century, which outline how much each person's life was worth. They ranged from a king who was worth 30,000 thrimsers down to a landless Welshman who was only worth 70 shillings. These were basic attempts to bring a legal, civilised framework to replace the idea of vengeance. Blood money was used instead of a blood feud. It isn't a perfect legal system. It isn't one which values all human life equally in a way that we might think it should do now. However, it was a system that at least tried to avoid creating the cycle of vengeance and violence that had characterised much of the Anglo-Saxon society up to that point. The Anglo-Saxons tried to stop vengeance and instead to create justice, or their concept of it anyway. Perhaps the most famous quote on the topic of revenge comes from the Bible. "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." That quote comes from St. Paul's letter to the Romans. St. Paul, in the New Testament, seems to state that the Lord is keen on vengeance. "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." However, the quote goes on to say, on the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. Now, this is more than vengeance. It's more, in fact, than justice. It is, in actuality, charity. The development of that Old Testament eye for an eye philosophy into the turn the other cheek philosophy that is the hallmark of the New Testament is a remarkable challenge to anyone living then and now. But our society and our justice is based upon those ideas of charity and love. The problem with those ideas is that we are always going to struggle to live up to them, as Mr. Cummings did on Wednesday. We are fighting against centuries of history where vengeance was supposed to be what we did. It was the honourable thing. Even now, there are few people who have ever not felt that desire to avenge a wrong, real or imagined. The more, though, that we live and work together in communities which rely upon laws, rules and justice and not vengeance, the happier and safer our world becomes. There will always, though, be those moments where anger gets the better of us. There will always be those moments where we speak cruelly with a desire to hurt or to wound. Those moments rarely, if ever, help us feel any better. It is so hard to let go of anger, and it is easy to mistake vengeance for justice. Often when I think about justice, I reflect upon Martin Luther King, the great civil rights leader of the 50s and 60s, and he said, "When you press on for justice, be sure to move with dignity and discipline, using only the weapon of love. Let no man pull you so low as to hate him. Always avoid violence. If you succumb to the temptation of using violence in your struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness, and your chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos." Violence for us now needn't be physical. Violence can simply be a mean word or an unkind snipe at someone, talking behind their back, driven by a desire to hurt them. Instead, we must focus on doing the right thing, on seeking justice and never vengeance. Only through pursuing that justice in all our dealings with everyone we encounter will we find inner peace and the true, genuine happiness that we are all seeking. Have a wonderful half-term break. See you in a week or two.